Friday marked the start of the highly anticipated trial of Donna Adelson, who stands accused of conspiring to orchestrate the murder of her former son in law and professor, Dan Markel. And Hidden True Crime plans to cover this trial with daily recaps. You can get caught up with our full backstory into this case. It's linked in this episode and in YouTube pinned comments. The case, it stems from a bitter custody battle between Dan Markel and Donna's daughter, Wendi Adelson. And at 75 years old, Donna faces the same charges that her son, Charlie Adelson, was found guilty of in the fall of 2023. The murder also involves two hitmen and a middleman, all of whom have already been convicted and are serving time. Despite the convictions, prosecutors maintain that their investigation into the Markel case is not complete. The state attorney's office asserts that Donna collaborated with her son in plotting the killing, raising serious questions about the extent of her involvement. As the trial unfolds, we will provide day-by-day updates, keeping you informed on every development in this high-profile case. Again, for those who want to review the backstory, we've included a detailed summary of the events leading up to the trial in the description below. After 3 intense days of jury selection, Judge Everett confirmed on Thursday evening that a full jury had been seated, 12 jurors and 2 alternates, made up of 8 men and 6 women. Friday morning, courtroom 3G at the Leon County Courthouse in Tallahassee, Florida, began to fill with spectators and family members. Harvey Adelson, Donna's husband, sat quietly on a reserved bench about 20 feet behind her. Across the room, Dan Markel's parents, Ruth and Phil, took their seats, preparing to face yet another trial in the ongoing saga following their son's murder. The courtroom buzzed with quiet whispers as the jury took their seats, and then Assistant State Attorney Sarah Catherine Dugan began her opening statement. She said that this trial centers on the allegation that the defendant, Donna Adelson, participated in a plot to hire a hitman to murder her former son-in-law, Dan Markel. Dugan also displayed an image of Donna from the time of the crime in 2014, highlighting that more than a decade has passed since Dan's murder and emphasizing the long, drawn-out journey of this case. Dugan told the jury that in 2014, Donna Adelson's family faced a major problem, and that problem was Dan Markel. According to the prosecution, the so-called solution involved Donna's son, Charlie, because he had a girlfriend with ties to individuals willing and capable of committing murder. Dan, known to friends and family as Danny, was a devoted father and a well-respected law professor at FSU. Dugan described the day of his death as starting like any other. Dan woke up, took his young sons to preschool, and headed to the gym for a workout. What he didn't know was that 2 hitmen had come up from Miami with a single purpose: to end his life. In what Dugan described as a scene resembling a horror movie, Dan was shot in the head while sitting in his car in his garage. A neighbor reported seeing a light-colored Prius speeding away from the house. Concerned, the neighbor went to check on Dan and discovered a chilling scene: his car window shattered, his glasses and phone on the ground, and Dan behind the wheel, injured and unresponsive. Police arrived to find him with a gunshot wound to the head. Dan was rushed to the hospital, where he survived for about 14 hours before being pronounced dead at just 41 years old. His 2 sons were only 3 and 4 years old at the time. Police immediately launched an investigation to determine who was responsible. Very little evidence had been left behind: no fingerprints, no DNA, no bullet casings, and nothing stolen, leading authorities to suspect a professional hit. The few clues they did uncover sent investigators down 2 main avenues: tracking the light-colored Prius the neighbor had seen speeding away and uncovering a potential motive. Both lines of inquiry eventually pointed to Donna Adelson. To understand the motive, investigators looked into Dan's personal life. At the time, he and Wendi Adelson, Donna's daughter, were in the middle of a bitter divorce and custody dispute. Wendi was attempting to move to Miami, where her parents lived, but Dan, who lived and worked in Tallahassee, opposed the relocation. Emails from Wendi indicated that Donna was the driving force behind her efforts to move to South Florida. Dugan told the jury that Donna's influence over her children went beyond typical parental involvement. She was highly controlling and had strong opinions on nearly every aspect of their lives: career choices, relationships, and even where they lived. When Wendi resisted, Donna would turn to her son Charlie to persuade or manipulate her into following her wishes. The emails made it clear that Donna was desperate for Wendi to find a way to move to Miami and saw Dan as an obstacle standing in their way. Donna reportedly pressured Wendi, telling her how much time she and her husband Harvey were forced to spend away from their dental practice to help Wendi and the children in Tallahassee. She framed the move to Miami as absolutely critical, insisting it had to be Wendi's top non negotiable priority in the divorce. In June 2013, the court ruled in Dan's favor, denying Wendi's request to relocate and dismissing it with prejudice. This meant Wendi could not request the move again, effectively blocking any plan to take the children to Miami unless something happened to Dan. After the decision, Donna reportedly told Wendi that Dan hadn't, quote, beaten the Adelson family, end quote, and reminded her that they were a team and would keep fighting. According to Dugan, Donna made repeated attempts to sway Dan, even offering him a $1 million bribe to cover the boys' schooling and travel expenses. When that failed, she suggested ways Wendi could pressure or manipulate Dan into agreeing. Dugan said Donna devised a strategy to frustrate Dan, making his life miserable. Because Dan was devoutly Jewish, she encouraged Wendi to pose the boys in front of a Catholic church, post photos on social media, and announce plans to have them baptized, thinking it would provoke him into compliance. Donna allegedly even joked that she didn't care if the boys had to be dressed in offensive ways as long as the relocation succeeded and Dan's control was undermined. She repeatedly told Wendi that the future of her life and of Harvey, Charlie, and herself depended on getting the children to Miami. According to the prosecution, Donna insisted she would never stop fighting for the move. Dugan said, quote, the evidence in this case will show that the defendant's closest confidant was her son, Charlie Adelson, end quote. She explained that Donna and Charlie spoke multiple times every day with Donna, consistently venting about Wendi's situation. According to the prosecution, she often used extreme language, even referencing life and death, and repeatedly described Dan as, quote, a crazy person. Well, Charlie, Dugan said, was the person Donna relied on to help solve her problem. During the ongoing divorce proceedings, Dan worried that Wendi was attempting to alienate him from his children. Both sides frequently filed complaints over violations of the custody agreement, and tensions remained high right up until Dan's death. About a month before the murder, Dan claimed that Donna had been speaking negatively about him to his children, calling him stupid and accusing him of trying to take the boys away from her. He asked the court to restrict Donna's unsupervised contact with the children, a request that was still pending when he was killed. Less than 48 hours after the shooting, Wendi and the boys relocated to Miami and moved in with Donna and Harvey. The children immediately started school nearby. Dugan said, quote, and just like that, their father was effectively erased from their lives, and the Adelsons' so-called big problem had been solved, end quote. Dugan described the Adelsons as a very tight-knit family. Harvey and Charlie both worked as dentists in the family practice, while Donna managed the office, and much more. She was the dominant matriarch who ran nearly every aspect of their lives. After Dan was shot, police interviewed Wendi. She said she had been at home in Tallahassee getting her TV repaired when the shooting occurred. When asked if anyone might have a motive to harm Dan, she acknowledged that her family likely had more reason than anyone else. Police allowed her to call her parents to inform them of the shooting. Afterwards, she reportedly told authorities that her parents, quote, acted surprised, so that's a relief. Law enforcement also questioned Wendi about anyone who might have committed the crime on her behalf. She mentioned her brother Charlie, who had joked in the past about hiring a hitman to kill Dan as a, quote, divorce present, but ultimately bought her a TV instead because it was cheaper. Ironically, that very TV repair appointment became Wendi's alibi on the morning of the murder, a setup orchestrated by Donna and Harvey. According to Dugan, the investigation into Dan's personal life ultimately led authorities to the Adelsons. Donna, who had repeatedly vowed never to give up on relocating Wendi and the boys to Miami, and Charlie, whose joke about hiring a hitman took on a much darker significance, were both squarely in law enforcement sights. That joke stopped being a joke the moment a hitman actually carried out Dan's murder. Police were also pursuing the second lead in the investigation, identifying the light colored Prius the neighbor had seen fleeing the scene. Investigators retraced Dan's movements that day and uncovered surveillance footage showing that he had been following all morning. The Prius tailed him from the gym back to his home in Benton Hills. And using this footage, along with phone and SunPass records, authorities were able to relocate the car used in the crime. But identifying the vehicle wasn't enough. They still needed to know who was driving it and why Dan was targeted. Investigators painstakingly combed through digital evidence, a process that took far longer than a typical shooting investigation, essentially searching for a needle in a haystack. Eventually, they traced a phone number that communicated with the cell tower near the gym where Dan had been working out. The number had a Miami area code and belonged to Sigfredo Garcia. Examining Garcia's call logs, police discovered he was in frequent contact with another number present at the gym that morning, Luis Rivera, a longtime friend from Miami. Phone records showed that both Garcia and Rivera left Miami 2 days before the murder, traveled to Tallahassee, and followed Dan on the day of the shooting. Minutes before the attack, both phones were turned off and remained off for about an hour afterward, only to be reactivated as they headed back toward Miami. They were later seen using a bank ATM while still in the light-colored Prius. With this information, police had identified the killers, but the question remained, why would these two men who had never met Dan travel all the way to Tallahassee to kill him? What or who connected them to Dan, and how did that lead back to Donna Adelson? Phone records revealed a crucial connection. Sigfredo Garcia's most frequent contact was a woman named Catherine Magbanawa. She had a long on and off relationship with Garcia, and they shared 2 children. Investigators also discovered that Catherine was one of Charlie Adelson's most frequent contacts. At the time of the shooting, Catherine was dating Charlie. According to the prosecution, this connection created the perfect link. Donna had a problem. Dan Markel and Charlie, under his mother's influence, helped solve it. The hitman happened to be Catherine's ex, creating a direct line to Donna's problem to the men who carried out the murder. Both investigative paths, the digital trail, and personal connections pointed directly to Donna. But there was a third path: money. Police examined bank records, employment files, and financial activity following the murder. They found that in the months afterward, Catherine, Garcia, and Rivera all made major purchases. The men bought motorcycles and cars, while Catherine acquired a black Lexus that had previously belonged to Harvey and underwent elective surgery. Yet, there were no legitimate sources of funds. Catherine's bank account showed a sudden spike in cash deposits around the time of the murder, far exceeding her normal income, and she had no employment records to account for it. 2 months after the murder, Donna added Catherine to the payroll at the Adelson family dental practice. Catherine began receiving regular biweekly checks from the business despite not actually working there. Over the next 2 years, Donna personally signed 44 checks to Catherine, providing a steady flow of unearned income. Investigators also noted a deliberate communication pattern. Calls always follow a chain. Donna to Charlie, Charlie to Catherine, Catherine to Sigfredo, and back in reverse. Donna never directly contacted Catherine or the hitman, and Charlie never called Sigfredo. If this was a murder for hire conspiracy, the arrangement appears to have been intentionally designed to insulate Donna and Charlie from directly communicating with the killer, with Catherine acting as the middleman. This episode is sponsored by Naked Wines. You know that feeling when you're staring at a wall of wine bottles in the store and it's like a lineup of suspects? All these labels look good, but who's really guilty of tasting amazing? I used to waste so much time trying to crack the case, reading clues on the back of the bottle, guessing which one wouldn't disappoint. Then Naked Wines swooped in like the lead detective I didn't know I needed. They cut out the middleman, no shady distributors, no just okay grocery store picks, and connected me directly with the real masterminds. Over 90 independent winemakers around the world. And the evidence, undeniable. These bottles are incredible, up to 60% less than store prices, and every shipment is like getting a fresh stack of case files, except the only thing I'm investigating is which one I'm opening first. The last one I tried was a smooth Pinot Noir that could have been Exhibit A in Best Wine I Ever Had. And yes, I may have conducted a very thorough investigation that night. Now is the time to join the Naked Wines community. Head to nakedwines.com/hidden. Click enter voucher and put in my code hidden for both the code and password for 6 bottles of wine for just $39.99. By April 2016, law enforcement launched an undercover operation to uncover all members of the alleged conspiracy. It had taken investigators 2 years to reach this point. They sought approval to tap the phones of Charlie and Catherine to monitor their calls. By then, Charlie and Catherine had been broken up for over a year. Catherine was back with Sigfredo Garcia, while Charlie had a new girlfriend but remained in contact with Catherine. Luis Rivera, already in prison on an unrelated charge, and Donna was focused on caring for her grandsons. Everyone involved seemed to be living normally, believing they had gotten away with murder. And to get them talking again, authorities deployed an undercover agent posing as someone working on Luis Rivera's behalf. The agent approached Donna with what was called, quote unquote, the bump, a tactic designed to provoke a reaction. He handed her a piece of paper with a news article about Dan's murder, including a phone number and a demand for $5,000. He implied that because they were taking care of Catherine, they also needed to, quote, take care of Luis. Notably, he never mentioned Charlie. Donna, already understanding what it was about, tucked the paper into her purse without reading it and immediately called Charlie. Rather than expressing shock about being approached, her first words were, quote, I got some paperwork delivered to me and I need to talk to you in person. It involves the two of us. You should bring cash to our meeting. The TV is probably about 5, end quote. The agent had referenced an ex-girlfriend, but Donna never mentioned Catherine by name. Charlie, knowing the code, understood that the TV referred to the alibi used in Dan's murder and that the ex-girlfriend was Catherine, the only ex he had ever involved in hiring a hitman. Immediately after speaking to Donna, Charlie called Catherine the only ex he contacted, and they did not report the attempted blackmail to the police. Their conversation sounded extremely cautious. They seemed aware that law enforcement might be listening and were wary of the bump. Following the call with Catherine, Charlie met Donna in person, taking on the task, Donna now designated as his responsibility. He later called and met Catherine at the restaurant where an undercover agent recorded their meeting. And during the conversation, Charlie expressed concern that the man who approached Donna might be an undercover officer or a legitimate blackmailer. He speculated whether it was someone seeking a quick profit or someone with inside knowledge of Donna's role in Dan's murder. Charlie reassured Catherine that if it was the police, it was actually a positive sign. It meant they didn't have sufficient evidence to press charges yet. He said, quote, if they had any evidence, we'd already be at that airport, end quote. At the time, the only detail police had released to the public was the light-colored Prius. While authorities knew the drivers were Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera, the public had no knowledge of that. This made Charlie's conversations with Catherine particularly revealing. He told her that police couldn't prove someone committed a crime simply because their DNA was found in a car used in the offense. To secure a conviction, the suspect had to be placed at the scene when the crime occurred. He explained that crimes are difficult to prove unless there's a witness, a confession, or recorded communication about the act. Charlie's point was clear. As long as they remained quiet, they were safe. Next, Charlie discussed 2 options for handling the blackmailer. One was to report it to the police, but that risked drawing attention and potentially promoting the blackmailer to talk, which they didn't want. The other option was to pay the blackmailer, making it clear that it was a one-time arrangement. He gave Catherine detailed instructions: call the blackmailer, say that the Adelson family had no knowledge of the situation, but offer the money as a charity gesture, and warn that any further contact would result in police involvement. Charlie admitted he feared the blackmailer might come back for more money, and he suggested that the most definitive solution would be to eliminate the blackmailer altogether. He said he was willing to pay whatever it took. Afterward, Charlie called Donna to update her, using coded language to indicate the situation had been handled. Catherine then contacted Sigfredo, instructing him to call the number listed on the blackmail note to identify the source. Following the undercover operation, both Sigfredo and Luis were arrested and charged. Luis later cooperated with prosecutors, explaining that Sigfredo had hired him to help carry out Dan's murder. He described it as a job requested by Catherine in Tallahassee with a payment of $100,000. During their trip, Luis said Sigfredo had a photograph of Dan, the intended target. After the shooting, Sigfredo's first call went to Catherine, who confirmed that they would receive their payment the next day. And the next day, Catherine delivered the payment to Luis at his home. The cash was packaged unusually, stacks of $1,000 in bundles of tens, $100 bills stapled together at the top. Catherine was then arrested as well. According to investigators, the Adelson family routinely handled large amounts of cash through their dental practice, which offered cash discounts. They kept their money in stacks, often stored in a safe. Charlie reportedly kept his own funds in similar $1,000 bundles, the same way the money was delivered to Luis. Law enforcement continued to pursue the case in the years following the arrest. In 2019, Sigfredo Garcia was convicted. In March 2022, Charlie Adelson was indicted, and 2 months later, Catherine went to trial. Catherine claimed she had no knowledge of the murder and suggested that the Adelsons had acted independently to hire the hitman. After being convicted, Catherine chose in October 2023 to testify in Charlie's trial, detailing her role as a middleman in the plan to kill Dan. She explained that Charlie had portrayed Dan as a terrible man, causing stress for his mother and sister. On the night of the murder, Catherine went to Charlie's house to pick up their payment. Charlie told her that his parents had just left and handed her the money in stapled stacks. Catherine noted that the cash felt damp, and Charlie explained that Donna had washed the bills to prevent them from being traced. She then delivered the money to Luis and Sigfredo. Police records later corroborated her account of the transactions that night. And during Charlie Adelson's trial, Dugan explained, he claimed that Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera had acted independently, coming to Tallahassee to kill Dan without his family's knowledge. Charlie asserted that he and his mother had been extorted by the hitman and Catherine. However, his account did not align with the evidence, and he was ultimately convicted in 2023. Within hours of Charlie's guilty verdict, Donna Adelson reportedly began planning to flee the country to avoid arrest for her role in Dan's murder. She researched nations without U.S. extradition treaties and applied for an emergency visa to Vietnam. She was overheard discussing placing her money into trusts for her grandchildren and, along with her husband, purchased one-way tickets to Vietnam using the emergency visa. However, law enforcement intercepted her on the jetway at Miami International Airport before she could board, and she was arrested.
Cell phone? No, I don't want to give it to you. Why do I have to?
Because my attorney said not to.
Why do I have to give it to you? This is evidence. Evidence. Do me a favor. She's under arrest. I have to go with. I have to go. I have to go. You don't have to go with. Let me help you out. No, I have to stay. Please don't do this. Don't stay. You need to grab the bags. Take the bags. Yeah. And you need to wait outside. Okay.
My husband's almost 80 years old. He can't
Yeah,
come
I
with
can't.
me.
Please, can I go? No, you can't join me there. Oh, don't do this, please.
Please.
Oh,
Someone's got
God.
to help him get home. This is terrible. You can't do this. This is insane.
Can I talk to that for me?
Is that okay with you?
Please. You don't have to have the handcuffs on. She's not going anywhere. Please. Please. You have anything in your pocket?
No, no.
Do you have anything of value in you?
No,
Does she have a necklace on? You
Wanna
can
go?
take the
My-
necklace
I'll take it.
Yeah, take it off. Yeah.
and the earrings.
And the earrings, the rings, take everything. You give it to your husband. Because once you arrive at County Jail, they're gonna make you remove all that.
Donna was subsequently charged with her participation in the murder. Following her arrest, authorities received reports from women in jail that Donna had attempted to bribe inmates to provide false testimony in her trial. She allegedly promised money, housing, dental care, and prescription drugs in exchange for statements that contradicted Catherine's account of the crime. It's sounding like the last trial we covered, isn't it? Hello, James Craig. Well, one informant allegedly even supplied law enforcement with a script that Donna had written for the false testimony. Well, prosecutor Dugan urged the jury to carefully consider all the evidence they would hear throughout the trial. She explained that it would clearly show Donna working hand in hand with her son Charlie, who then turned to his girlfriend Catherine to set the murder plot in motion. Dugan emphasized that while Dan Markel's death may have solved what the Adelsons saw as their problem, it came at a devastating cost. She ended by telling the jury that when all the evidence was presented, they would have no doubt about Donna's guilt. Let's listen to the state's conclusion.
The defendant acted in furtherance of this murder plot that went beyond
just thinking about it or just talking about it. And these acts make her guilty as a principal to first-degree murder, just as if she was the one pulling the trigger in the garage herself. And while the defendant's choices helped solve a problem within her family, they came at a very high price. She took the life of a loving father of 2 little boys and caused a lifetime of grief for Dan Markel's loved ones. And at the conclusion of the evidence in this case, you will be convinced beyond any reasonable doubt that this defendant is guilty. And at that point, we'll ask you for the only verdict that does justice in this case, which is a verdict that this defendant is guilty as charged. Thank you.
Taking the floor for the defense, Donna Adelson's attorney, Jackie Fulford, began her opening remarks by directing the jury's attention to 2 easels, one holding a photo of Dan or Danny Markel and the other of Donna. She acknowledged the state had presented a detailed story, but argued that none of it proved that Donna planned, arranged, or paid for Dan's murder. Fulford spoke about Dan's achievements as a respected attorney and law professor at Florida State University, noting that he earned recognition and success, but what he never earned, she said, was for someone to take his life in such a brutal way. She reminded jurors that Dan's main priority had always been his children. According to her, by the time of his death, the divorce proceedings and relocation disputes had ended, and no one was fighting anymore over where the boys would live. Fulford pointed out that Donna had even helped facilitate video calls between Dan and his children, ensuring he could still see them when they weren't in his custody. Fulford told the jury, quote, "These children were not deprived of their father by her. They were deprived because someone brutally stole him from them," end quote. Take a listen.
You guys are way younger than me, so maybe you don't even know about this, but I guess there was a thing called Skype. I don't even know if it still exists, but I guess it's like FaceTiming, but doing it on your computer. And that's how he wanted to talk to his kids, so that he could see them when he wasn't with them while he spoke to them. Now, at 3 and 4, it's kind of hard to wrangle them to sit down in front of a screen. So Danny came up with a really good idea. When he Skyped the children, it would be, most of the time, after the kids had had their dinner and had their baths, where they're kind of calmed down, they're not in their little running around state, and he would read bedtime stories to them. When he didn't have his little kids, he still wanted to know that when the children went to bed, they didn't forget about Daddy. And he made sure that didn't happen. These kids are not deprived of their father. Their father was brutally taken from them. Not just when they were 3 or 4, or 5 or 6, or 7 or 8, but up into their teens. They lost the opportunity because someone took it from them to grow up with a father, to have his involvement and influence in their lives, to talk about what he did as a kid and share his experiences. All of that was stolen from him. That's very important.
Fulford reminded the jury that Donna was, in her words, a, quote, normal person just like all of us, end quote. At the time of the murder, Donna was 64 years old, and those who truly knew her would describe her not as the villain the state had painted, but as a kind and caring woman. She also clarified that Donna worked at a dental practice owned by her son Charlie, not by her husband Harvey, as the state had suggested. Fulford acknowledged that the prosecution could prove certain elements of its case, including that Charlie Adelson orchestrated and financed the plot. But she stressed the state had no concrete evidence tying Donna directly to the crime. She admitted that Donna had made some harsh and even vile comments about Dan during the messy divorce, but stressed that the evidence would show she did not treat him that way face to face or in front of the children. Instead, Fulford framed those remarks as the unfortunate byproduct of a bitter family dispute, something she noted that happens in divorces far too often. Fulford went on to portray Donna Adelson as a warm, selfless woman who always put others before her. She then turned to July 18th, 2014, the day Dan Markel was killed, describing how Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera tailed him throughout the day before ultimately following him into his neighborhood and shooting him in the head with a revolver. Fulford said, quote, "In that moment, I cannot imagine the fear that man must have felt," end quote. She argued that the case against Donna was built far more on theories and motives than on hard evidence. The prosecution, she said, had painted Donna as the mastermind behind what she called an outrageous murder. But Fulford added, quote, "It's outrageous he was killed, and it's also outrageous that we're sitting here," end quote. She urged jurors to carefully listen to every witness and weigh only what the evidence proves, not speculation or assumptions. Fulford concluded by saying, quote,
At the end of the case, because there's not going to be evidence that she did this, keep an open mind. Listen to all of it. We're going to ask you to find her not guilty of every single count. Thank you.
A quick word from this episode's sponsor. Moms, you do everything for everyone else, and somehow your own wellness always gets shoved to the bottom of the list. And trust me, I get it. I'm lucky if I drink actual water before 2 p.m. That's why I'm obsessed with Live It Up Super Greens. It's my new one small thing that actually sticks. No hassle, no fuss, just scoop, mix, and go. 30 seconds and I'm done. Whether I'm tackling school drop-off, back-to-back calls, or staring down the laundry mountain, and that's all I do, I just stare at it, that this is an easy win that supports digestion, energy, and immune health in just 30 seconds. Live It Up Super Greens is an all-natural blend of over 20 superfoods with organic veggies, probiotics, digestive enzymes, and zero junk. No sugar, no dairy, no gluten, nothing artificial. And it actually tastes good. Not good for a green drink, good, just good. Live It Up has become a quick and easy way for me to stay on top of my health, and the ripple effect is real. 96% of people who take it daily say it helps them eat more veggies and feel healthier. Live It Up is offering you 15% off your first order, including subscriptions with code HIDDEN. Plus, shipping's always free. Head to letsliveitup.com/hidden. That's letsliveitup.com/hidden and use code HIDDEN for 15% off your first Super Greens order. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. The prosecution wasted no time moving into testimony, calling their first witness, James Geiger, Dan Markel's neighbor on Trescott Drive. Geiger explained that he and his wife had lived near the Markels since Dan and Wendi moved in as newlyweds. Though they weren't especially close, Geiger recalled that the couple seemed like a, quote, nice young pair. He also knew they were in the middle of a divorce at the time of the shooting. On the day of the murder, Geiger testified that he heard several loud bangs from inside his home. At first, he wasn't sure what the noise was, but when he looked outside, he noticed a car speeding out of Dan's driveway. He said it was, quote, so fast it immediately caught my eye, end quote. At first, Geiger thought it might have been a break-in. He saw that Markel's car was still in the garage, the engine running and the door open, which made him think nothing had been stolen if Dan was still home, but something didn't sit right. He told his wife, quote, something just seems wrong. So when he went back to check a second time, he walked into the garage and realized the driver's side window of Dan's car was shattered. At first, he thought Dan might just be on the phone inside the vehicle, but then he noticed the glass, the blood, and Dan slumped over behind the wheel. Geiger said, quote, I hollered, Danny, what's happened? Getting no response, he immediately called 911. Jurors then heard a portion of that 14-minute call. On the recording, Geiger can be heard telling the operator, quote, he's still alive, he's moving. It looks like someone maybe tried to shoot him, but I don't know what happened. Let's listen to that 911 clip.
What's your emergency? It's right next door at my house, which is 2122 Trescott Drive.
Can you repeat that for verification?
2122 Trescott Drive, T.
Okay, the phone number you're calling from?
I'm calling from 850-2.
Okay, tell me exactly what happened.
We heard a loud bang and a car pulled away from next door. I came over and looked in, the garage door was up, and I thought the gentleman was backing out, and I went back to my house, but he never backed out, and I came back over, and his driver's side window is shattered, and he's battered, and can't answer. He's inside. I don't know if somebody tried to shoot him, or if he shot himself, or what, I don't know.
And it was at this location, correct?
Right next door. I'll give you mine. I don't know his address. It's next door.
Okay.
He didn't send an ambulance in a hurry. EMG. He's still alive. He's moving.
Okay. What's going on with it?
I don't know. The driver's side window was all bashed in. He's inside. The car is running, and he's got blood all over his head. He's not responding to me. That number, by the way, is 211.
The prosecution's second witness of the day was David Sims, a retired sergeant with the Tallahassee Police Department. Sims was the first officer to arrive at the scene of Dan Markel's shooting. He described finding Dan in his car, noting the broken driver's side window, shattered glass on the ground, and the positions of items in Markel's hands, a cell phone in his left and a business card in his right. Sims testified that Dan was still alive when he arrived, but only making faint sucking sounds and never regained consciousness. Let's take a listen.
Okay. When you got there, was the vehicle running?
Yes, it was.
All right. What did you do when you first arrived and observed the vehicle?
I walked up to the driver's side window. Mr. Geiger had told me that the homeowner's name was Daniel, and I saw someone in the car, and I spoke his name and said Daniel. He didn't know there was no response, and I got a little closer and found that the driver's side window was broken kind of at an angle. Some of the glass was in, some had come out, but there was also a small rounded spot in that glass that was still in there. I said Daniel again, no response. He was slumped over and kind of gasping for air, and it was just a sucking sound. I noticed that he had a set of eyeglasses. Half of a set of eyeglasses was laying in his lap. He had a cell phone in his left hand. He had a business card in his right hand.
Next, Sims recalled shutting off the vehicle before securing the scene and speaking briefly with neighbor James Geiger, who had heard the gunshots. As prosecutors presented crime scene photos, Sims explained what they showed, including the damaged driver's side window. When asked by prosecutor Georgia Capelman whether there were any signs of a burglary or a struggle, Sims confirmed there were none. The prosecution next called Joanne Maltese, a retired forensic specialist with the Tallahassee Police Department. With 15 years of experience, Maltese was responsible for processing the crime scene on Trescott Drive the day of Dan's shooting. She explained to jurors that she collected key evidence, including Dan's broken eyeglasses, which were photographed and placed into evidence. She also dusted for fingerprints, but found none that were usable for lab testing. As prosecutors displayed the photos she had taken, Maltese walked the jury through each image, from the shattered driver's side window to the two halves of Dan's glasses. She also introduced Dan's wallet, noting it was recovered at the scene with cash still inside, underscoring that robbery did not appear to be a motive. Maltese spoke directly to the jury with a calm, professional demeanor, holding their attention throughout. But the courtroom grew emotional when Prosecutor Capelman concluded her questioning by showing a hospital photo of Dan after the shooting. The image of his bloodied, swollen face drew audible gasps from the gallery, and even Donna seemed to break down in tears.
Did you also go to the hospital?
Yes, I did.
What were you asked to do at the hospital?
Document and collect any evidence.
At the time that you responded to the hospital, was Mr. Markel deceased or still alive?
He was still alive.
I'm going to approach and show you what I've marked as State's Exhibits 22 through 24. Do you recognize these exhibits?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize them?
I took those photographs at the hospital.
Are they fair and accurate photos of how Mr. Markel looked that day?
Yes.
Move into evidence, State's Exhibits 22, 23, and 24, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
States 22, 23, and 24 are admitted.
Publish 22, please. This is how Mr. Markel appeared?
Yes.
And this was done on the 18th?
Yes.
Cross-examination.
No questions, Your Honor.
Very well. Ms. Maltese, you may step down.
This witness is excused, Your Honor.
The prosecution's fourth witness was Dr. Anthony Clark, a former assistant medical examiner in Tallahassee who now works in Georgia. With more than 8,000 autopsies during his career, Clark was recognized by the court as an expert in medicine and forensic pathology, allowing him to provide both factual and professional opinions. Clark conducted Dan Markel's autopsy and walked the jury through his findings, supported by x-rays and photographs from both the hospital and the autopsy itself. The images were graphic, showing 2 bullets lodged in Dan's brain, heavy bruising to his face, and deep swelling around his eyes. The presentation drew audible reactions from those in the courtroom. According to Clark, the first gunshot wound was not immediately fatal. Evidence suggested Dan may have tried to shield himself by raising his arm. The second shot fired directly into his forehead. It was catastrophic and left no chance of survival. Take a listen.
So the first shot would have been to the left cheek area, which traveled from the left cheek just before the left ear, hitting soft tissues, fracturing the jaw, fracturing the left cheekbone. Again, this is maybe slightly incapacitating, maybe stunned him, but would not immediately put his lights out. Okay, so that is where all the pseudo-stippling's coming from that glass shattering. Glass is not there anymore. The second shot is to the forehead, where the actual gunpowder can strike the skin, and the hand was raised somehow into the vicinity of that cylinder gap.
And that's the second shot, is the one that was not survivable?
That's correct.
And was there any amount of medical attention that could have assisted Mr. Markel, say, if it had gotten there sooner?
Well, these are pretty devastating injuries, particularly the gunshot wound in the brain.
Clark concluded that Dan's death was a homicide. And just before taking a break for lunch, Judge Everett addressed Donna directly about her reactions during testimony. After briefly discussing the matter in a sidebar, he chose to make his point in open court once the jury had stepped out. The judge cautioned Donna to manage her expressions and movements during the proceedings, noting that visible gestures or emotional outbursts could be disruptive. Judge Everett said, quote, "It's very important that you are able to control your emotions," end quote. Adelson quietly responded, yes.
The matters that we've discussed at sidebar concerning emotional responses, I do feel it is important at this point, Mrs. Adelson, when the testimony is occurring or the evidence, I know you may have a natural reaction, but as best possible, you need to control your reactions concerning any head movements, any expressions of disagreement, or any emotional outbursts. The jury must decide this matter on the merits, on the evidence. Do you understand this? Very well. I do not wish to do this in front of the jurors at all, but it's very important that you are able to control your emotions. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Court resumed with retired Tallahassee police investigator Craig Isom taking the stand. He testified that he first spoke with Wendi Adelson at a restaurant roughly 3 hours after Dan was shot. He was wearing his badge during their interaction, but Isom reassured her that she and her children were not any trouble. He emphasized that Wendi was neither detained nor under arrest and was not considered a suspect at the time. Isom walked the jury through surveillance footage from the day of Dan's death, illustrating how hitman Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera tracked him in the hours leading up to the murder. In addition, Isom detailed his investigation into the Adelson's family's dental business, including his review of its payroll records.
Did you, as a result of developing Catherine Magbano as a potential suspect, investigate her at all?
Yes.
All right. And did that include an investigation into her employment?
That's correct.
What was her employment status around the time of this murder?
At the time of the murder, I believe she worked at another dental office somewhere, but post-murder she started receiving compensation from the Adelson Institute.
What is the Adelson Institute?
It's a dental practice, according to online information, operated by Harvey Adelson and Charlie Adelson.
Okay, and were the two of them dentists?
Yes, I believe Charlie is recognized as a periodontist.
Did you come to learn what Donna Adelson's role, if any, was in that business?
Yes, she was clerical and kept books for the business.
Did you attempt to procure some employment records from the Adelson Institute to verify Ms. Magbanowa's employment?
We did.
All right, tell us about that.
Myself and Special Agent Sanford from the FBI went to the office, physically to the office in Broward County, Tamarack, and served a subpoena seeking records for the employment of Catherine Magbanowa, and we received nothing at the initial time. Later on, the best I could get from, I believe it was an attorney that represented that dental office, just a list of checks that were paid checks from the Adelson Institute to Catherine Magbanowa, but no W-2, no responsibility forms, nothing that showed what she actually did as being employed at that institute.
What was it, regular business hours when you entered there physically?
Yes.
Was Ms. Magbanowa present when you entered the building?
No.
Did the employees that you have contact with seem to know who she was or what it was that she did there?
The initial person that I spoke to at the desk, at the front desk, she had no idea who this person was, who Magbanowa was. The other person that came up to the front, she said she knew the name, but did not know what her responsibilities were with the company.
Defense attorney Josh Zellman began questioning Isom about his background and the investigation. Isom said he had been a detective for 6 years at the time he was assigned to the Markel case, and he agreed that thoroughness is critical in a homicide investigation. Zellman also asked about Donna Adelson's email practices, noting that she shared an address with her husband, Harvey. Isom confirmed that some emails from that account were signed Dad, while others were signed Mom or Mom and Dad. He testified that while he had been contacted by someone identifying as Charlie Adelson's attorney, no one ever reached out to him on Donna's behalf. Before testimony could continue, Judge Everett called the attorneys to another sidebar over a prolonged dispute regarding evidence. The debate centered on divorce records between Wendi and Dan, along with emails referencing Dan's parents, Wendi's dating life, and other personal matters. Prosecutors argued that these materials helped establish motive, pointing to Donna Adelson's animosity toward Dan and his family, while the defense maintained that much of the evidence was irrelevant and risked unfairly influencing the jury. Everett expressed frustration that the objections had not been resolved prior to court and warned that jurors' time would not be wasted. He suggested a line-by-line review of exhibits if necessary. Some evidence was ultimately allowed with redactions, including the removal of a racial slur to prevent prejudice, though much of the content remained restricted, and attorneys were instructed to narrow their presentations. Once the jury returned, Isom resumed his testimony. He walked the jury through emails from the shared donnaharvey@gmail.com account, including messages with Donna's name attached and others signed by both Donna and Harvey. He also reviewed correspondence from divorce filings, highlighting emails in which Dan expressed concern over Donna having unsupervised contact with the children, and messages from Donna emphasizing the importance of Wendi's relocation plans. Isom then addressed allegations regarding payments from the Adelson family dental practice. Prosecutors have argued that Charlie and Donna used the practice to pay Catherine. Isom testified that Donna signed the checks to Catherine, but investigators found no other evidence of her employment. Front desk staff had no knowledge of Catherine, and there were no W-2 records, schedules, or performance evaluations. While she appeared on the Adelson Institute payroll, there was no proof she actually worked there. Isom emphasized that the signed checks were the only tangible evidence connecting her to the practice. Defense attorney Zellman clarified that Isom had not reviewed employment records for other staff and only investigated Catherine. Take a listen.
You don't know whether or not any of the employees had a written job description?
No, I do not know that.
You don't know if any of the employees' files had evaluations or job reviews?
I didn't see that. I would think with that type of business in working on people's mouths and so forth, that there would be a little scrutiny involved.
But you don't know if they kept those records for any employee,
I have no
do you?
idea. I was only seeking and only had cause to seek for Magbanoa.
Zellman also questioned Isom about Catherine's arrest, with Isom explaining that shortly after the arrest, an attorney representing Charlie Adelson contacted him. He said, quote, "It was shocking to me that within that short time frame, the only way that this person would have knowledge would be from Catherine's attorney. No media, nothing had been divulged," end quote. He confirmed that no one representing Donna Adelson had reached out either. Throughout the questioning, Judge Everett occasionally sent the jury out of the courtroom to handle ongoing objections. He warned the defense against repeated delays and asked whether additional challenges were expected. Zellman and co-counsel Jackie Fulford continued reviewing evidence for potential objections during brief recesses. After completing the testimony on emails and payroll, Isom was allowed to step down, though he remains a retained witness and may be called back later. Convicted hitman Luis Rivera took the witness stand next. Rivera, a member of the Latin Kings gang, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and agreed to cooperate with the state, providing testimony in every trial related to the Dan Markel murder. He is currently serving a 19-year sentence, reduced as part of his plea deal. Rivera described how he and his childhood friend, Sigfredo, or Tuto Garcia, were recruited to carry out the killing. Catherine, who Rivera identified as Garcia's partner, connected them with a dentist who orchestrated the murder. Rivera testified that Catherine was romantically involved with both Garcia and, quote, the dentist at the time. He said they were hired to kill Dan Markel so that his wife could regain custody of their children. According to Rivera, he and Garcia made an initial trip to Tallahassee to scope out Dan, following him to locations including the children's daycare. They returned in July 2014 to carry out the murder, renting a Prius and bringing a .38 caliber revolver. Rivera recalled that Garcia accidentally discharged the gun through the car's floorboard, hitting the gas line and forcing a temporary stop to repair the vehicle. The murder was carried out that day because Dan was preparing to leave town, information they received through Catherine. Rivera described the events of the murder. They followed Dan as he dropped his children off at school and went to the gym. He said, quote, "I pulled up right behind him and Garcia jumped out and shot him," end quote. Afterward, Garcia called Catherine to confirm the hit, with Rivera listening in because Catherine coordinated their payment. Rivera said he received $35,000 in cash the following day, describing it as weird because it was stapled in bundles of hundreds. Garcia received $40,000 and Rivera could not recall Catherine's cut. A piece of paper with Dan's photo and address had been given to Rivera and Garcia when they were hired. The two men, who considered themselves like brothers, visited Tallahassee twice, delaying the first attempt to avoid killing Dan in front of the children. Rivera emphasized that he had no contact with the Adelson family. All communication went through Catherine. He also noted that before going through with the hit, he had suggested robbing the Adelsons for the money instead. On the day of the murder, Rivera drove the Prius into Dan's driveway while Garcia exited to shoot him through the car window. Garcia later disposed of the firearm in the ocean. Rivera explained that after receiving the payment, he and Garcia used the money to buy new cars and motorcycles. And about a month later, despite his involvement, Rivera maintained that his only motive was to help a woman, Wendi, recover her children. Next, defense attorney Jackie Fulford began cross-examining Luis Rivera. And during her questioning, she mistakenly referred to him as Garcia twice, and Rivera corrected her. Fulford asked whether it was Wendi Adelson who wanted Markel killed, and Rivera confirmed that it was. He further clarified that the motive was her desire to regain custody of her children. Rivera testified that, to his knowledge, Donna and Charlie Adelson were not involved in the plot, emphasizing that Wendi Adelson was the person who orchestrated the hit. Fulford then had Rivera briefly recap key points of his testimony, including that he purchased the gun used in the murder but did not personally carry out the shooting. Using a photograph, Rivera identified Wendi Adelson as the person who wanted Markel dead, but he did not indicate any involvement by Donna or Harvey Adelson.
And the second time that you came up, you knew he was going to be taking the children to school, and so you followed him to the school. correct?
At daycare, yes.
Yes. And then you knew he was going to be going to the gym, right?
I didn't know he was going to the gym. I just followed him.
You followed him to the gym?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you followed him to his house?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's where he was killed?
Yes, ma'am.
And the woman who wanted him to be killed, past you and Sigfredo and Katie, the woman who wanted him to be killed was Wendi Adelson, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
It was she wanting her children, correct?
Absolutely.
Mr. Garcia, I'm going to show you what
Mr. Rivera.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. I apologize. Mr. Rivera, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 50. Could you take a look at that and tell me if you recognize that?
Yeah.
And what is that?
Like a profile of everybody's face.
Okay. And did you make some marks on this for me and then sign it on March the 11th of 2025?
Yes, I did.
You just hold on to that for a second. Mr. Vera, when we met with you that day taking your deposition and I presented that to you, you gave us information about what had happened, pretty similar to what you talked about here today, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And when we were done talking about those things and some information about Sigfredo and Katie, I presented you with what's in front of you as Defendant's Exhibit 50, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And I asked if you would put the number 1 and circle it next to the person you know as Katie, who you said was in charge of this whole deal, correct?
Yep.
And did you do that?
Yep.
All right. And then I said, would you put a number 2 next to the person you say did this killing?
Yes.
And you did that, correct?
Yes, I did.
And that was Sigfredo Garcia.
Yes, ma'am.
The first one was Katie Magbanois, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then I said, would you put a number 3 next to yourself on the paper? And did you do that?
Yes, ma'am.
And you're the one who got the gun that was used to kill Danny Markell, and you drove the car that day. You didn't shoot him, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then I said, if you would, please put the number 4 next to the man who was killed, and you did that with Danny Markell, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then I said, if you would, put the number 5 next to the lady that wanted the man killed. And did you do that?
Yes, I did.
And was that with Wendi Adelson?
Yes, I did.
And then I asked you if the 2 people on the top of the page who have their pictures there and the names Donna Adelson and Harvey Adelson, you see those on the top?
Yes, ma'am.
I asked you, as far as you know, were they involved in any of this? And you said no, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So I asked you to put X's next to the people who on that page were not involved in this.
Yes, ma'am.
And you did that.
Yes, I did.
Thank you.
After completing this line of questioning, Rivera stepped down from the stand, though the state noted that he may be recalled at a later point. Judge Everett then announced that the court would recess until next week. He instructed all parties and the jury to return Monday morning at 9:15 a.m. and warned against reading or seeking any information about the case over the weekend. The jury was then dismissed. Many spectators reported seeing Wendi Adelson at the courthouse, signaling that she is expected to testify soon, once again under immunity, as she has during the previous trials. But that concludes the coverage for day 1, and we'll be back again on Monday to bring you what goes down on day 2 as Hidden True Crime continues to follow this trial. So hit subscribe and hit notifications, and make sure again to check out our backstory on this case as we follow along.